everyone. So we're back. Welcome back to the show. Today we're going to go ahead and paint up this model here that we talked about through my Twitter and my Instagram. If you didn't, if you're not on there, you should check it out. This model is called he's a slaughter priest, but he's a specific type of slaughter priest. He's been basically taken over by Chaos, and he is more bestial than man anymore, and he's on the verge of probably becoming a Chaos spawn. So his name is he's a Gorehulk. So is what they can call a Gorehulk. So we're gonna start painting on his skin here first. And then we're gonna talk about why I chose to start with a Chaos army. Chaos isn't the first faction I played. Actually, it's the second to most recent faction I've got into. When it comes to the Games Workshop type games, the most recent being Dark Eldar. So when I first started in Warhammer, I actually started with Battlefleet Gothic and a small Imperial Guard army. I didn't really know much about Warhammer at the time. I was stationed in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I bought the starter box, and I got the Imperial Fleet from there. And my best friend in the Marine Corps at the time, a guy named Jeremy Hoff, he played the Chaos. He didn't really do much of the painting or anything. I painted everything up. I guess we probably were not paying much attention to the fluff or anything. I don't know what we were doing much back then. We spent a lot of time, training for the military and everything. Painted up his army in a light gray with gold trim, and I painted up mine in a dark gray with red trims. And then that's how I started into my Warhammer existence. Playing those two games with small Imperial Guard army that we really just built and painted. We didn't ever play the game. And then with Battlefleet Gothic, which we did play a lot of, and I ended up actually shortly after buying heavily into the Imperials, I actually liked the design and the style of the Eldar, so I bought heavily into the Eldar when they came out, and that's the faction I played mostly actually for my time in Battlefleet Gothic. And then 2007, I got out of the Marine Corps. I basically stopped playing miniature games between the time that the wars had all started until then. And I got home, and my little brother had bought in some Warhammer stuff, and I kind of got pretty heavy in it. He calls it, as he refers to it, he calls it my evil origin story. Because he'd had just a small force of Kachins, and then the 2-player 4th edition starter box that he'd gotten with a friend, and I made him play the game. I don't know if he even knew it was a game. He just kind of liked the models, and he wanted to build them and paint them, I guess. But I actually forced him to play the game, and so he played a few games, and then he went away for the summer to a church camp, and while he was gone to church camp, I spent basically all the money I made over the summer on building up our forces. I bought heavily into the Tau, which became my main force. I bought us an Eldar army. I increased the Space Marine army significantly, and I bought him a bunch of new Imperial Guard as well, and increased our Tyranid and started us a Necron army. So we basically had a good percentage of the factions from Warhammer 40k 4th edition represented at this point in our games. but my main faction was Tau. And we'd played a few small games against each other. But we didn't really have codexes. We were just going off of what we knew from that little 4th edition starter book that came with the Assault and Black Reach box set. And then we went to the local game store that was about 65 miles away from us in this little town called La Pine. And while we were in there, we actually got to spend most of the day there. So the store owner, a guy named Eric, ended up getting a teaching game in with me, and it was my Tau versus his Chaos army, and he was playing a Chaos army of Khorne the Berserkers led by Khorne the Betrayer. And Eric was a super nice guy, and he had his ideas of the way he wanted to play a game, and it wasn't exactly the way the game was played at the time. So even though it was basically my first teaching game with someone that had actual experience playing the game, he didn't play 100% of the actual rules. He played Khorne more like he was, I guess, from the 3rd edition, early 3rd edition book, than what was in the 4th edition. He still ruled my army pretty hard. And so that was pretty interesting learning game. And I wasn't a huge fan of the way Fantasy played, the Chaos had played. They were an interesting faction to me at the time. But from my military background, I liked the combined arms aspect you basically got by playing a faction closer to Tau. So it was many years later. So that would have been 2008 I was playing that. Many years later, right around 2011 maybe, right before my daughter would have been born, I was teaching some of the people in the army. I joined the army by that point, teaching them how to play, and we were still playing 4th edition Warhammer. I had been out of the game market a little bit, moving around a lot again, so I bounced in and out of game there for a few years. And so we're some of these kids, they had saw some of my models I had with me when I came in, and they were interested, so I bought some stuff for us, and it was all mine, but I was letting them use some of my models. And we went to this local store, and these guys convinced us to switch over to the new edition, 5th edition. So I bought a 5th edition rulebook, and I think it was right at the tail end of 5th edition at that. Bought this 5th edition rulebook to learn the 5th edition rules, which seemed pretty close to the 4th edition rules. There wasn't a whole lot of differences. Wound allocation, I think, had changed. Was a big significant change between the 2 editions, and then a few of the weapons stats, like guessing weapons, I believe, if I remember correctly. A lot of Eldar weapons had the guess range on them, and that rule went away between the 4th and 5th edition. And so I met this guy there at the local store, and his name was Zeus, and he played basically exclusively Chaos at the time, and he was one of the better players down at the local store, and he was in there playing a game with a friend of his, and they asked what army I played, and I told them I played Tau, and they kind of made fun of me, and I kind of didn't feel welcome, and I didn't actually go back in the store for probably maybe a year and a half after that, until finally I went back in because I'd made some friends, and they convinced me to start playing again. And I gave it a shot, and I was just playing friendly games, and then they got involved in the tournament scene, and actually became pretty solid friends with Zeus. And his buddy that had made fun of me more than Zeus had, I don't remember his name, but I don't really think I met him that often. I think he just was there that one time, and I don't think Zeus even remembered the whole thing happening when he saw me again. But we ended up becoming friends, and we played a lot of games, and we talked, and he asked why I played Tau so much, and I explained why, and he thought that was a really cool reasoning behind it, and started getting into different games, and I started really liking fantasy more. I hadn't played much fantasy type games up until this, and my first foray into Warhammer Fantasy was with Lizardmen. I bought a pretty big Lizardmen army right at the tail end of their 7th edition Warhammer Fantasy book, and then to the 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy book. And that was a huge change for the Lizardmen. And even though I'd bought this really big Lizardmen army, I wasn't having very much luck winning any games with them. Even though I had a bunch of the big stompy dinosaurs, and I had a bunch of the big source boys, I just didn't get the... I thought basically you needed these, like, the armies to be more like your Warhammer armies, where you had a lot of different units to combine their arms, but the lizards were basically designed around making your skinks. Skinks do a lot of your work for you. I also didn't quite understand units designed to be feigning units and drawing other units out. That wasn't, at the time, it was a different style of gameplay for me. I'd never really played anything like this. So I had a hard time adjusting my play style to a fantasy type game. And then I switched over to Dark Eldar because or Dark Elves for fantasy, because I'd had a Dark Elf army for a while that I'd used for 40k, for Dungeons and Dragons. And I didn't build it up huge. I just bought a few more things to get it a little, I think probably about 1,500 points of Dark Elves at the time, make them more playable. And my buddy Zeus, he played, and he had played Chaos for a long time, but he decided he wanted to switch over to a Ogre army, and he wanted to sell me this Chaos army, and I had really no interest in Chaos. It wasn't my style of army. In 40k sense, I didn't like armies that... I had a hard time buying into Space Marines already, and so the Chaos Space Marines just didn't make a whole lot of sense. Why would these guys not use real tactics? What was the point of them fighting these wars the way they fought them? It just was a little, took me out of the element of the game, I guess. I have a little bit of sense of separation from my game and the real life, but I need, for the fantasy element, but I do need a little bit of that non-mysticism, I guess. I need to have a little bit of base of reality in my games. And maybe that's weird to say, but it's just the way I felt at the time. And so I ended up, I was a little resistant to try out this Chaos army, but eventually he got me to try him. I think he got me to just play 2 games with him to see how I liked him, and I ended up winning my first game of Warhammer Fantasy ever with this Chaos army, and he was selling me a pretty well-balanced army, I would say, at the time. Warhammer 8th edition. It was a Chaos Lord, then a Chaos Lord on a demonic mount. I want to say there was about 30 Chaos Warriors, 5 Chaos Chosen, 20 Chaos Marauders, and 10 Chaos Warhounds, and there might have been a few more things in there that I'm not remembering, but that was the bulk of this army. There was also 5 Chaos Knights, I want to say. So it was a relatively small model count army compared to any of the others I played. Even Lizardmen were significantly more models, even with their monsters, because just the amount of points between your Chaos Lord, your Chaos Chosen, and everything, it was just a significant increase in model count. So I played this one game of Warhammer Fantasy with them, and I enjoyed it, and so I ended up doing him a favor, and I picked up this army from him. Really good deal. I don't remember the price I paid him, but it was probably 50% of what you'd pay retailed, maybe maybe a little more. Like I said, I can't remember 100% exactly what I paid, but it was a good deal. Zeus has always treated me really good that way and given me pretty decent deals on kits that he's willing to part with. And so I picked up this army from him, and then as I did more reading and more research, I really started to enjoy like the story and fluff behind the faction of Chaos called Khorne. And Khorne really spoke to me a lot because it was more like, to me, he felt like he was a misunderstood, misrepresented Chaos deity of all of them. He didn't really care about furthering Chaos goals. It was always about furthering his own goal. That's the way it felt to me. And also, he seemed to be, all about the honor of fighting war. And he didn't care where the blood flowed. It could be from his guys or the enemy. So I started looking into more Chaos armies, and I ended up starting up a Warhammer 40k Chaos army, all Khorne models. Started playing into Chaos a lot more, and then the 6th edition Chaos army came out in the starter box with the Dark Vengeance set, and it was the Crimson Slaughterers, and they had the new Chaos Cultists, and Chaos Cultists with the Mark of Khorne were really, really brutal in the game, and so I was at this time starting to get really heavily into the tournament scene. I had 2014 went to Feast of Blades with my Tau, and I did okay. I would say not great, just okay. I made the qualifiers. I was able to play in the tournament itself, but I only won one of my. I want to say I played 5 games there. I only won one of the 5 games. These guys are extraordinarily well-versed players. So I took a break from Tau for a little while, and I started really playing into this Chaos army more for fun than tournament play. I was a little burned out in tournaments, maybe, I'm not sure, but I was having a blast with this army Khorne. It was against everything I'd ever done really in the gaming before, and I just started to play them to enjoy, to have fun, and it was a big change in my style of gameplay. Going from an army that never did close combat and relied on combined arms and maneuverability to this other army that's just like get as many models as you can on the board and smack you in the face and get as much damage in as fast as possible. Kind of almost a glass cannon-y type army, but not, because we had staying power as well. So Khorne was really fun for me to get to play. I had a blast with this Khorne army. And so then my fantasy at this time was kind of winding down. The end times had started up, and they launched their new edition of their fantasy type game, Age of Sigmar, and the starter box for it, and actually centered around a Khorne army and the Stormcast Eternals, as everybody knows, the Age of Sigmar. And I got super into Age of Sigmar right off the bat, and I got massive amounts of these Khorne warriors, Blood Reavers and Blood Warriors, and started buying the other unique kits, the Slaughter Brutes and the Skull Grinders, and all these new Khorne models. They were just lovely, lovely models, and I was having a blast painting them. I enjoy painting red. Red's one of my favorite colors to paint. They're so versatile. So many different shades of red out there that you can do so much work with. And I started buying these massive demons and demon prince type models and bloodthirster type models to get these beautiful pieces on the table. Bought some models from Creature Caster. They've just done a Kickstarter. Bought the big demon for Chaos from Forge World. It was a nice, beautiful model. I need to finish him. He's almost fully painted. Got to fix some pieces that broke in my move up to here. Then there was a few other. I think there was Ultra Forge, Ultra Cast. I can't remember off the top of my head what they were. They were whoever existed before they became creature caster, basically. The same sculptor, I want to say, did both sculpts, and so I ended up buying some of those demons. The war, I think they was called the War Demon. So my Khorne army grew significantly in just a few months. Went from a small, tiny amount of chaos into this massive, probably 10, 15,000 points of chaos models. Then we started running campaigns and playing lots of games, and I just kept buying. I kept buying chaos, constantly buying into chaos. I stopped basically buying Tau stuff at all at this point. Just having so much fun playing and painting up these chaos models. The Khorne Lord of War came out. Got 3 of those. Then the Chitin Demon Engine from Forge World that came out, I got one of those. Actually did a real good deal with Zeus, and he painted that thing up for me. Super beautiful, great paint job. And Zeus is an excellent painter. So yeah, lots of stuff happening, lots of fun to be had. So that's what kind of drove me into starting and playing Khorne and Chaos. So there's been some really interesting developments recently in the world of both Age of Sigmar and in 40k. Many people know the World Eaters just got the brand new codex. It's the first time World Eaters have ever had a codex all by themselves. They did have a Demonkin codex that had World Eaters in it. It came out during 7th edition of Warhammer 40k, but that wasn't really a World Eater codex because it covered all the different Khorne aligned factions. So it was yet again another great addition to the game. They released some new models for that Khorne specific cultists, the Khorne Jackals, and as well as the new 8-bound, which are like Khorne possessed Space Marines that have 8 different demons bound to one mortal soul, which is really cool. The 8, as many people might know, is the number of Khorne. Then what else? The Warcry got its expansion that had a Khorne warband in it. That was really, really cool. Really beautiful warband came out there in that set. So yeah, Khorne's just gotten such a huge boost. When Warhammer Underworlds originally came out, it was a faction of Khorne in there. The starter box for that, I believe they're called Garrix Reavers, and that was my favorite little faction to play in that game for multiple seasons. I played Garrix Reavers, and I had a really good warband. They're kind of glass cannony. They're a bunch of, if you had played with Age of Sigmar, they're obviously Blood Reavers. They're like almost Chaos Marauders, but with no armor. Big two-handed axes and stuff like that, and they kind of used their numbers and their frenzy to get the job done. And they went up against 3 Stormcast Eternals. You know, the complete opposite. They had heavy armor, and so it was an exciting time to get into Warhammer Underworlds. I ran many game nights of Underworlds. We'd had multiple seasons of the game's tournament packs down there at the store I worked in called Military Gamer Store in El Paso, Texas. Um, and then after Garrick's Reavers were out, Magor's Fiends came out, and I was going to paint them myself, but met a local painter named Todd, and he ended up painting my Magor's Fiends for me. And so as soon as those guys came back to me fully painted, I started playing them a lot, and they were pretty brutal. They had a really good chance against pretty much any of the factions in the game at the time. So Magor's Fiends definitely became my go-to faction to play as. And then once Magor's Fiends kind of started, I guess they took kind of a hit. They weren't as viable as time went on. They became pretty hard to play as into the factions that had more magic. So between me moving up here to Washington and the fact that I couldn't find a group, and the fact that Magor's Fiends weren't quite as forgiving as they had been, I kind of started moving away from playing into Underworlds as much, and so move in and out of games. It's quite often for me. Started playing Warcry, and I played a what I thought was a really decent little Warcry warband built out of the existing, currently at the time, Khorne models, once they allowed a full Khorne faction into the game. And then obviously the pandemic hit. Once the pandemic hit, it was pretty much gaming came to a complete standstill for me for anything with Games Workshop related. Because unlike a lot of the other games I have that I can play solo, you really can't play very many of the Games Workshop games solo without a lot of legwork to get them adjusted and changed. I guess not substantially, but enough to be playable. It's a huge time investment, and I had just started experiencing a lot of solo games right before that, and instead of wasting the time that I could have easily put into these to make the armies playable, I kind of strayed away from Games Workshop games, and even though I have huge amounts of them and I enjoy the games in a lot of ways, I'm not sad about it. I do want to play a lot of these games again. I would love to do a Path to Glory eventually again with a Khorne warband, probably led by either an aspiring Deathbringer of Khorne, or maybe a Skull Grinder of Khorne. Those are my favorite Khorne heroes from the new Khorne models. And Slaughter Priests are pretty cool too, but I don't see them as being the definitive leader. And when I do my Path to Glories, and they've changed, the way Path to Glory works isn't the same as it was back when I first started, which is sad. I really enjoyed the way Path to Glory was during the first and second iterations of Age of Sigmar. But Games Workshop changes stuff. That's fine. That's their prerogative. So the way I would normally decide who would be my hero in my Path to Glories is I would break out my board game called Gorechosen. So it was a board game, and it came out probably in 2015-16 timeframe. Would be if I had to remember. And it was 4 heroes, Khorne heroes, and they were in this arena, and they would fight for the honor of Khorne in the arena. And so what I would do is I would use those heroes, and I would fight out the game, and whichever hero would win out of the 4 would end up being the leader for my Path to Glory army. And then I would roll up the factions, and I loved the randomness of a Path to Glory. Back then, everything was randomly rolled, and so I thought that was very chaotic in nature, and that's really spoke to me. Everything needed to be randomly rolled for these, because I wanted to just let chaos do deciding and the dice gods, the deciding factors. It's all chaotic to me. Much like Dave from Mini Wargaming. He liked it for many of the same reasons I did. And so that's the way I would do it. And I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. So I'd get this warlord from my game Gorechosen, and that would end up being the leader that was going to lead my war band in my path to glory. And then I'd roll up his random little guys that would be his followers for his descent into the mortal realms, and his and who he would lead to victory over all the others. And I'd run these little path to glory narrative events at the game store, and I was kind of more like almost the ringer for the events because I worked at the store, but that's kind of what I want back. I want that type of feel. And so third edition Age of Sigmar is out right now, as many people know, and I was super interested in trying to get into this path to glory, but the more I did the research on it, it's just not the same anymore. And my local Games Workshop right down the road, it started up a path to glory. I believe it's a path to glory campaign play, but unfortunately, it's really hard to coordinate anything there. It's a Games Workshop store, so it's not like they have their own website. Like their own Facebook. They can, like, you could coordinate with. I guess I think some of the guys talk through a Discord server, but I don't know very many of these local players, and I don't have phone numbers for any of them, and I don't have contact information on Facebook for any of them. I don't know how to really coordinate and talk to these people very well. So even though I'm interested in playing it, I don't know how to go about coordinating a meeting with these people, I guess, is my biggest problem right now. And that's no excuse. I should just go down there. And so I did sign up for it, and I think it's going to start really soon. And the shop runner, he told me, or she told me, that it's no set days, and you could just coordinate with whoever you're matched with to get a game in over the week. I think it probably already started. I just haven't got to it. I need to make the time to go down there, but it looks like I'll be starting a new job and I'll be working weekends, and that's probably the best time for me to get down there. It is a Games Workshop store, so it is closed on Monday and Tuesday of the week already, which already makes it harder for me to get in any games. Two of my days that I obviously have the most open to get stuff in like that, just out the window automatically. But it is what it is, right? And it's like I said earlier, it's not the same. It's not like it was before. Heck, I haven't even officially bought the third edition full rulebook, which I believe is where you actually find the Path to Glory rules. So I don't even have the full Path to Glory rules. I only have the Path to Glory rules that are in the Chaos Undivided Age of Sigmar rulebook. I actually haven't bought the newest battle tome for Khorne for Age of Sigmar. Should probably pick that up soon, even though it's probably not a whole lot different than my old one. I do know some things have changed, and those things probably are going to make big differences for gameplay, and so I need to, if I was to play my Khorne, I would need to know those rules. So I'm probably, if I get into that game, instead of going to play my Khorne specific faction, I'll be playing more of a Chaos and Defiant faction, and I'll be running a Khorne marked army at least. They'll definitely be marked with the symbol of Khorne. I don't really care much for magic users And even though I might have one as an ally here and there, no matter what army of Khorne I'm playing. Um, so, everybody says Khorne hates magic, blah, blah, blah. You know what? Yeah, Khorne hates magic, but even the biggest, best, strongest chaos worshipper of Khorne knows that magic has its uses, and why would I let my enemies have a powerful tool that I have no access to? So if I can ally in a powerful chaos sorcerer of some type, that I won't trust that sorcerer whatsoever, but I'll ally him into my army, and then if I need to smash his face because he's betrayed me, I know I can because I'm stronger and more powerful than he is, right? That's the way I see it. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm crazy, but Khorne wills it. Alright? So, yeah, so that's how I got into. Oh, well, that's not supposed to be red. That's my build, and I gotta go back and touch up some paints here and there, anyways. All right, so let's put some washes on this guy. So, oh man, I guess I can't talk for a full hour about Khorne. My brother told me there was no way I'd be able to talk for an hour about Chaos and Khorne. I was like, I think I can handle it. I'm pretty savvy about talking about these things. But maybe I just rushed. Sometimes I don't. I just start rambling and I skip over things. Like I think I wanted to talk about when I first met Dave from Mini Wargaming at Valhalla in the fall, and at that point I had already been into Khorne for quite a while. And while Dave is a Chaos Undivided player, mostly I do believe he has a fondness for Khorne above some of the other gods, and we became kindred spirits as we bonded over our love of Khorne and Chaos. So I will say that's one thing that I am glad of me becoming a player of Khorne that happened. I was able to make that connection with Dave, which is nice and it's cool. Have that person within the community already out there that you kind of have a little bit of a bond with, even though you've never met before, and now that you've met, that bond's probably going to be there forever. And maybe it won't. Maybe we'll grow apart. We haven't seen each other in probably 6 years now. But we still talk once in a while through the internet. And he always interested in what he has going on in his career. So, yes, the power of Khorne compels you. It's a pretty interesting little model here. I think I might have missed some skin on his belly. Zoom in here on this picture I have of him and double check. Yeah, it looks like I did. It looks like his belly, his belly goes all the way down to his armor. It's not a belt there. So, in other news, as many people have seen or maybe known about, there's other games out there that I am interested in. One Page Rules has a faction inside it called the Havoc brothers, the Forces of Havoc, and I kind of see them. They're obviously their version of Chaos, and so my brother Ray and my brother Patty and my buddy John here have started our version of a kind of a Path to Glory, playing one-page rules, and we're kind of basing it on the old White Dwarf for Warlords template. So if you don't know, or you're not familiar with, White Dwarf puts out these articles where these 4 different members of the White Dwarf staff build up a force, and they talk about it and they play games very Path to Glory like, and it's called Four Warlords. So we're doing something very similar, and we're calling it, I think we're calling it the Four Drunkards. And I had originally decided I was going to play the Havoc Warriors, Havoc Bros in it, and I built a pretty cool little force for it, I think. It was 2 increased squad-sized units of having terrible memory right now. Their version of the Chaos Warriors. So basically 2 10-man units of it. 10 of them will be my regular Chaos Warriors, where the other 10 will be the Chaos Chosen with the 2-handed halberds, great weapons. They're going to be led by a Chaos Lord or a Havoc Lord on a demonic mount. And then there will be 5 Havoc Knights. That's their cav, just like a Chaos Knight. They will have 10 Barbarians, which are Marauders. And then there's going to be a Chaos Chariot with a Hellbeast, a Havoc Chariot with a Hellbeast, which is basically like your Chaos Chariot with a brute pulling it, not the horses. And then I have 5 Havoc Knights, or not Havoc Knights, Havoc, what are they called? The ones that are going to be on, they're on horseback. Marauder Raiders, the light cav. I can't remember what their name is right now. I don't know why. But I'll have 5 of those guys, and then their version of a Chaos Shrine, a Havoc Shrine, and I think I have 3 Chaos Havoc Ogres, which I'm going to be using the new Chaos. They're not ogres; they're the Myrmidon. They look like beastmen, minotaurs almost. I was going to use those guys for that. I was going to put 3 Chaos Trolls into this army as well, but I couldn't find any good Chaos Troll models, and Games Workshop doesn't really make a Chaos Troll kit anymore, and even though the old Chaos Troll kits they had were almost impossible to find. So the base coat for his skin and the base coat for his armor is done now. I'll have to go ahead and obviously do the cleanups. I got to do a little bit of black cleanup for his clothing with some highlights, and then hit all this bone and metal work up on this guy. But he's about halfway done at this point. Like I said, when I paint, I don't try to paint for any type of competition. I like to get my paint jobs. They're what we would call tabletop ready. And this is the big guy. He's no small miniature. Let's see here. So he's obviously on a 40 mil base. Here he is next to a Minotaur from Mercer Miniatures. He's almost the same height as the Minotaur here. This is a fully painted model. I just need to finish his base off. So these guys are pretty brutal force. I use them for one-page rules. I have a nice big force of them. I need to add to it though to get them up to 2,000 points. I need to pick up some models from that series of models from them. Alright, so my next thing is I need to wait for this wash to dry. While I'm waiting for that wash to dry, I guess I can do some of this bone work. In the photos that of this guy here, his bones are like a lot darker, but I'm going to paint his bones up with my normal pattern that I use. And the way I do bone work is I start with Xandri dust. If you can't see it, so you start with Xandri dust as the base. For all this bone work in here. I might not. I might try something different because I see he has a spine piece here that comes up. Oh no, I know what I'm going to do with that. Alright, yeah, so all this bone work is going to be done with my normal style. Start with Xandri dust as the base. Get a nice base of Xandri dust down on all this bone work on here on this guy. And then I'll hit it with a wash of Agrex Earthshade, and then I'll dry brush or I'll line, depending on how it works. I shouldn't be doing this bone because I have to go in and still hit all this skin. I might be able to miss most of the bone, but I'm probably gonna have to do some touch up on it. So we won't do the wash on it until after we finish the skin. Some of these detailed models are just a lot harder for me to paint anymore because there's so many details in them. And the way I paint my models, I use a lot of washes and a lot of dry brushing techniques, and it's really hard to complete some of these techniques without hitting other spots, especially with the brushes I use. I don't know if you can see, but it has this little tassel thing hanging down here, and I'm going to do them in silver, but the tassels, between the tassels are like arm bones, so he has a bunch of arm bones hanging down from his crotch here. But I don't know what game I'll play with this guy in first. I don't really, like I said, I don't really play Underworlds much anymore. I bought this faction when it first came out for Underworlds, but I haven't even played a single game of it. I think it's been out almost a year now, I want to say, for this faction. And there's no one I really know around here that plays Underworlds, or at least if they do, they don't really advertise it. And maybe it's just the area I live in. There's like 3 Games Workshop, like actual Games Workshop or Warhammer stores. Actually, there's 4. There's 4 of them that I know of within a 30-mile distance of me. So that's a significant amount of actual Games Workshop stores in a relatively close proximity to myself. Alright? And then, on top of that, you have your other friendly little local stores. I have one that's 2 miles down the road north of me. Well, maybe it's 4 miles north of me, based out of the South Hill Mall here in Puyallup. And then I have one that's about 2.5 miles, 3 miles south of me in Graham. And then there's another 3 or 4 that are within a 20, 30 mile drive of me. You know, you can go all the way down to Olympia and play Olympic Cards and Comics. Probably has one of the biggest gaming groups around. At least that, you know, you hear of. But the drive is crazy, and the gas prices around here aren't cheap. So there's a huge amount of players that I know play many different games, but it's getting them to play regularly with you. I think that's my problem right now, because it's all about the travel and the distance. When I was more centrally located over in the DuPont area, I felt like I was able to get in a lot more games. I was able to go 10, 15 minutes to get to the game matrix, or 10, 15 minutes to get the Gabby's, Olympic Cards and Comics. I was a little bit more centrally located to all of the Games Workshop stores. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm overthinking things, but it's just the way I feel, and it sucks, because I love to get out there and get more games in, but between my, you know, working jobs, I work nights when I do work, for the most part. Since I started working up here, I've been mostly a night employee. So working jobs at nights, then sleeping during the days, and on my days off, it's hard to try to stay awake during the daytime to get that game in. But I will gladly make the sacrifice if I know it's going to be a fun game with someone I really like. If I could find a good solid group of people that I knew I wanted to play with, I'd spend some time to build and paint this epic model I have, and it's a Khorne Lord on a dragon, and that thing is beautiful. My buddy Zeus managed to pick that up for me. Really good deal. Again, he got it for me. Man, so many parts for that thing. I had it at one point before I moved. I had it all put together, and then I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was just positioned wrong, if I put it in the wrong box. I don't remember. Something happened. It broke, and it was super sad. And you know, when you have a really complex model that you've put together, and then all right. So as I was saying, I have this beautiful model from Forge World. Big Khorne Chaos Dragon with a huge, almost an ogre, I would say, Chaos Ogre Rider. He might be a human. I don't know. They don't even know if they put out any fluff for the guy. He's just beautiful, beautiful model. One of my favorite models they put out for Khorne in a long, long time. I also had the Khorne Greater Korgoth, which was originally supposed to be the Chaos Dwarf Kadai Destroyer model, that they repurposed into this Khorne Greater Korgoth one. Fantasy died and Age of Sigmar took over. Those are my two big Age of Sigmar purchases from Forge World. Beautiful, beautiful kits, both of them. The Korgoth, I want to say, is about maybe 50% painted. With that Khorne Dragon, didn't even get a primer on him before he broke. But if I can get a good group, maybe playing one-page rules, or maybe playing Age of Sigmar more often, mostly friendly games. I don't think I'd take something that big into a non-friendly game. I did play him. I've only played, I think, one game of 2nd edition Age of Sigmar since I've been up here, and I did bring him to that game. I told the guy what I was bringing. I'd never really fought against the Indoneth Deepkin, so I knew what he was bringing, because he told me that's what he was playing, and I brought that guy into that game. It was the only time he was in fully built state, and man, he doesn't have a base, so the guy was like always confused, like where he had to be to hit my model, and I'm like, dude, let's just pretend there's a base that 3-inch bubble around him. So if you're within 3 inches of the model, you can hit him. You know, because that model's huge. It doesn't come with a base. I guess you could probably make a custom base for it if you wanted to. But much like a Titan, it's just such a big model. Sometimes a base takes you out of the element of that model. And he's so big. If you put a base down on that guy, I don't think you'd be able to have a lot of terrain on your table. Or he would just wouldn't fit, you know. But, oh man. I want to go build on this. I think I might break him out of the bits box today and put him back together. That might be my plan after I get done painting here. I'm only going to probably paint for about 5 more minutes, maybe finish up all this bone work here. Get the dry brush down to the skin and the dry brush down to this armor. And I think we'll paint this guy again next week. We'll work on him a little bit more. So that's been my journey into Chaos. And specifically why I chose Khorne out of Chaos. Not that Khorne is the only Chaos faction that I have. Actually, one last story, little story here. So when I first started really ramping up Age of Sigmar campaigns down in El Paso, I decided, I wanted to try some new factions out. So I started it was kind of a Path to Glory, but more of an escalation league. There was a local store down there called Sun City Games, and the owner and his brother, really good people, and they'd let us do these events where it would draw in business and get people to play into these new games. And so we ran this event where to play in the event, you had to purchase a new unit from the store that would be the base of your army, the starting point of your army. But after that, you could build and paint from anywhere. I didn't care. But it was encouraged from you to build and buy new models from the store. You'd get extra points into your faction bonuses, and they hadn't quite stopped selling a lot of the new kits. I mean, not the new kits, the old kits. So, and we didn't know they were going to stop selling many of those kits. We didn't really know what was going to happen. It was a really brand new game. There was no point values for any of the models at this time frame. Still, there was just a lot of mystery still in that world of Age of Sigmar, and I bought into a new army, a faction I'd never really played before. I had a buddy named Jamie who just did this for his kill team type game, getting people to buy into new factions for that, and I actually had got it. I wanted demons. I figured I'd build up my Khorne demon army at this point because I didn't really have Khorne demons, but I ended up getting plague bearers and pink horrors. So I was like, oh, what am I going to do with these? I don't play these two factions in Chaos. So then when I did it for Age of Sigmar, again, I was like, well, let me do something I haven't done before, and I ended up building a newer army of the old school not Chaos, but the orcs. The orcs that they don't sell or make anymore from Games Workshop, not the heavy armored orcs or the savage orcs, the regular orcs, and I've got them to get me. And since I should have known, because at the time they didn't have them in their normal boxes, and they were on their special order item list. But I ended up getting 2 boxes of the Orc Boys, an Orc War Boss, and a unit of the Orc Boar Boys, and a Wyvern. The metal kit, actually, surprisingly enough, it's still the old metal kit. Plastic wings, and
then I built my own warlord for the game. He had a foot version is how he started off, and then as he advanced, he advanced up on levels of what he could ride. Originally, he could ride on a pig, and then I got him a mount up, which is kind of like a more of a rhinoceros type mount thing. I actually used this creature from Confrontation called a Brontox. So I bought that kit, and that's he'd level up and he'd be able to ride the Brontox, and then after the Brontox, he'd level up to be able to ride on the Wyvern. So he had 4 levels, and it was a really fun thing. Fun little campaign there that I ran, getting me another fantasy Age of Sigmar faction in that works. Never finished painting them all the way, but I made a pretty good progress, and I made a really cool display board for him that didn't end up surviving the move up here to Washington from El Paso. But I had a lot of fun with those, and then I met these 2 guys when I was running this campaign, named Vince and was it Aaron? Yeah, man, I can't remember his brother's name. Anyways, they were really nice brothers. They both played Chaos as well. I want to say Vince was playing Skaven at the time, and his brother was more into like Zinch. And we talked, and we were gonna start filming. I'd been wanting to start this battle report filming stuff even as far back as then. So we talked for quite a while about when and how we could do this filming of these battle reports. And I made this pretty interesting story, I thought, in my brain, where I would control multiple armies, and then they would control like their one specific army. And I want to say that Vince had decided on I want to say he decided on Selnesh, and his brother had decided on Death, actually, as a faction he wanted to play. And then I was going to have a human faction that was going to be mostly made up of kits between Bretonia and the Empire, but they weren't going to be called those because this is the Age of Sigmar, right? And then they were going to be being led by this warrior priest who had heard the call of chaos, and or not chaos, the call of Sigmar, and he was leading them on this quest to vanquish Chaos's ability to resurrect this most powerful demon that could help Chaos finally conquer the mortal realms once and for all. So they were going to kind of be, I guess, the protagonist overall of the storyline. But I was also playing there was a Khorne faction that was being led by this Khorne Lord, and he had been given a vision of this ultimate Khorne demon that, if he released it, would allow him to scour the land and forever claim it in the name of Khorne. And then there was a small Nurgle faction that had basically they had to go through their Nurgle territory to get to this chaos area. So there was a chance you would have to fight a skirmish against this Nurgle warband. And then there was beastmen that could be recruited basically by any of the chaos factions to fight for them, depending on like how much power you would have generated as your primary army. If that kind of makes sense to anybody. It was just narrative storytelling. And then there was a Skaven faction that had, they were, oh man, maybe Vince was playing Skaven as well. Vince might have been playing two armies, I can't remember. And then they were going to be like already present at the area where this Chaos demon thing had been imprisoned, and it was imprisoned in this mighty fortress ruled by Chaos Dwarfs. So I actually bought this huge amount of Chaos Dwarfs, but not the forge-rolled ones. I ended up getting the Mantic ones, which are, I think they call them Abyssal Dwarfs. So I bought a bunch of these Abyssal Dwarfs from Manic to run this campaign with, and painted up a few of them, not a lot. Didn't get very many of them fully painted up before we ended up deciding to cancel it all. But I thought it was a great storyline. I did a lot of writing and work and painting. We were trying to develop individual characters and backstory and history on these characters, and we were trying to film it all, and just timelines and personal issues and health. A lot of things I think prevented us from completing it, and then I did have a heart attack at around the time we had started the planning phases of it all, so I lost multiple weeks of painting and planning due to that. And then I started working at the game store shortly after that. So, you know, just things change, plans change, things happen. But I would love to get back in that story. And now, with the release of the Silver Tower game through Games Workshop, and then on top of the Silver Tower game being released, they have also put out the more Zinchi and Saneshi specific kits. I could run some really beautiful Chaos Undivided versus Khorne versus Nurgle versus Zinch versus Slaanesh games, and I still have a ton of Skaven and these Abyssal Dwarfs that I can use for Chaos Dwarfs. I'd be really interested in running this back out again. And we were going to do this really interesting mechanic where the human army was built fully up to, like, I don't remember how many points, but they were the largest army starting off. Everybody else had only 1,000 points as their starting army, but then as games went on, they could recruit new armies, new people into the armies. But because of the human army was out there basically traveling this chaos forsaken land, if they lost models or units from their army as they traveled, they couldn't reliably replace them. So even though you had this 10-man unit of archers to start off with, as you traveled and they were engaged in combat in the games, and if you lost 3 guys from that game, the next time they played, they'd be 3 guys down. They wouldn't automatically get new recruits, but they had a way that if they prayed to Sigmar, and I think it was a dice roll from their priest, they could call in Stormcast Eternals basically in a deep strike to help fight their war with them. So it was really fun, really interesting mechanics I thought that we'd worked up. So I would love to revisit that. If you guys want to hear more about that, let me know, and we can go into more depth and detail about that. This is where we're going to leave off on this guy this week. Thanks for joining me. We'll paint up on this guy some more next week. The base coats are all down on him, minus 1 brown. I got to get a brown down, but I think I'm going to wait on that brown around his. He has 2 straps on each leg, here, 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 and here, and then it will be just highlighting, and then the golds going back in and picking out all these little bone sprouts from his skin, these metals on his chaining his arms up, and all that stuff. So yeah, next week that's what we'll plan on doing. Probably maybe two more weeks of painting this guy to fully complete him up. We'll see. If I get how far I get on him next week, I might not finish him on camera. I might finish him off. All right. So thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up if you like the video. If you subscribe, if you want to subscribe, right? All that stuff. Catch y'all guys next weekend. All right. Later.